It's a question we get asked all the time. What is the coalition doing? Or more specifically, why is the coalition voting against so much legislation, making itself irrelevant on so many major issues? And given the messages from the last election, why does the coalition stubbornly stick to just say no?
They say no to power price relief for households. They say no to making super stronger for the future. They say no to ending the climate wars.
Well, we at The Guardian may not be dead to Peter Dutton 3.0 Smiles Edition anymore.
You were going to smile more, Peter. You were going to smile more.
But we aren't exactly on the inside track when it comes to being included in his tactics meetings either. But it doesn't take a political savant to work out what the strategy is here. You just need a passing glance at history, and fairly recent history at that. You see, every time the coalition says no and vacates the stage, the Labor government has to negotiate with the Greens and progressive senators to get its legislation across the line. The Greens always want Labor to go further to the left in their ambitions, while Labor attempts to stay somewhere in the middle. In theory, the just say no strategy gives the opposition room to point at a Labor-Greens alliance, which at one point in the not-so-distant past was one of the coalition's greatest and most successful scare campaigns.
You know, blowing off the old Tony Abbott handbook.
When Tony Abbott became opposition leader in 2009, he used the seeds of discontent within the Labor Party leadership to his advantage, becoming deliberately obstructionist. And when Labor just flopped over the line for government in 2010, he used the hung government to his advantage again, saying no time and time and time again, until it became an art form, forcing Labor to spend its term in heavy negotiations, both in the House and the Senate.
He is all opposition and no leader. And
despite passing every bill it put to a vote, Abbott was able to create the perception of chaos, and not just chaos, Labor-Greens chaos. And he rode that no wave all the way to the election.
I can inform you that the government of Australia has changed.
And now it turned out that was not great preparation for leading the country, but it didn't matter. He got there. And he got there just after 2 elections, despite Labor's thumping 2007 election win. It took Labor years to recover. The coalition was in power for close to a decade. And fast forward to now, and Peter Dutton is taking the lessons of the no-alition and applying them to this parliament.
That the uncertainty that they are creating in the marketplace will mean a reduction in investment.
Can't hear you, Minister. You know the truth.
Saying no means Labor and the Greens and progressive senators like David Pocock own all the decisions. The idea being to sit back, drop in some scare campaigns, wait for the electorate to get antsy at the progressive agenda and swoop in pointing fingers, while simultaneously offering a stable alternative. It's a tried and tested tactic.
Once again, turning the coalition into the no-alition.
But, and there is a big but here, the game might be the same, but the spectators have changed. Study after study after study shows younger voters, millennial and down, want progressive governments. In fact, they're getting more progressive as they get older in Australia, bucking the trend that age equals conservatism. Why? Well, for one, millennials, and we're talking about people in their 30s and early 40s now, don't have the same wealth to protect. We've come to age just as the wheels of neoliberalism have started to come off. We've been locked out of the housing market and from building individual wealth. We haven't seen the same wage growth that could set you up for building individual wealth, while at the same time, we've seen cut after cut after cut to essential services. Plus, the planet is cooking. So the idea of a more progressive government isn't exactly scary to a lot of people. In fact, the research tells us it's what younger voters want. They want their governments to go further. They want action on climate. They want intervention in the housing market. They want governments to step in and stop price gouging. They want public funding for essential services. And they want tax reform. What they don't want is the same old, same old. And they're not rusted on. They'll make up their mind issue by issue. It's more about a vibe than a political party. And usually that alone wouldn't be enough to worry the Conservatives. But at the same time as millennials are looking for something more progressive, they're also about to eclipse baby boomers, with whom the coalition has found the most electoral success over the last 50 years or so, as the largest generation in Australia. The coalition is banking on old truisms holding, well, true. They're hoping that people will want to protect that individual wealth and keep government out of their business as much as possible. And they're hoping that having the Greens' fingerprints over as much big Labor legislation as possible will send voters scurrying for the Windex, cleaning them both away. But the main takeaway from the last election was that the old rules no longer apply. At the moment, the coalition is betting on history repeating. But the thing about history is that it's usually written by the victors. And this time around, it's the generations who have been losing who will decide.